Today, we're going to ask an uncomfortable question, but one that really needs to be talked about. Do Americans somehow actually deserve Donald Trump and what he's doing to their country? Now, obviously, no one deserves that nightmare. But, well, here we are, and you have to wonder, who really is responsible for his dramatic rise to power and control? It's the kind of question that cuts deep and can easily offend a lot of people. Finding answers demands that we look at history, media, culture, economics, and the psychology of American politics. The truth is, elections have consequences. So maybe, just maybe in some ways, Americans have brought this on themselves, what's happening to them. And yeah, maybe they are responsible for the mess they're in. At least some of them. Maybe even a lot of them. But it's more complicated than that. And this is not just about placing blame or trying to shame people. It's about trying to understand, how could this have ever happened? Trump and MAGA are really just a consequence. The logical consequence of systematic political failure. It's not a fluke. It didn't just happen. Donald Trump didn't just fall out of the sky. He wasn't beamed down from Mar-a-Lago by Putin and Russian satellites. No, he wasn't planted into the system. He is the system. He is the system, stripped of all filters, shame, and common decency, along with a big dose of bad grammar, incoherent arguments, and warped reasoning. Trump is what happens when a democracy, or something pretty close to it, stops functioning for enough people that eventually a madman chaos candidate presents himself and he starts to look like a messiah to some. Look, decades of political status quo destroyed many people's trust, and it created outrage. And Trump understood one thing better than almost anyone else. You don't need to fix the system if you can make people hate it. That's how a failed businessman turned reality TV star convinced millions of people that he alone could fix it by burning it all down and destroying it. But look, he was helped along the way, encouraged, supported, and enabled all the way along by countless people and institutions that should have known better, but who chose to protect or advance their own interests with little or no regard whatsoever for the resulting consequences. And that's partly where we got into this mess. Look at your politicians. The U.S. system has long incentivized politicians to pander to extremes and to serve their own self-interest. Republicans gerrymandered during districts to ensure safe red seats. And those safe seats usually end up rewarding the loudest, most performative, and most polarizing candidates, which Congress is now filled with. Continual legislative gridlock on both sides, especially since Newt Gingrich, created a vacuum of disillusionment with both parties. Legislation becomes almost impossible to pass. Trump didn't cause this. He just exploited it. Now he's governing by edict. He doesn't need legislation passed at all. He's doing everything himself by authoritarian presidential actions, executive orders. He seized power, eliminated Congress. Every action from declaring wars to creating and terminating government agencies to imposing tariffs, he's got it covered, and he's doing it unilaterally. Once again, Trump didn't invent this game. He just played it better than anyone else, and that's on the system. Now, we come to the Supreme Court. Various federal district courts, as well as the Supreme Court itself, have ruled against Trump recently on several of the administration's actions. And his response? Just ignore the court and their rulings. Is that illegal? Of course it is. But, look, the Supreme Court last year made an unprecedented decision, and a sweeping decision, that the president, i.e. Trump, could not be held criminally responsible for anything he did, provided it was part of his job as president. And what he's doing is as president. So he can disobey the court all he wants to. And it's illegal, but there are no way they can hold him criminally responsible for that. There's no consequence to him disobeying the law. So there you have it. The checks and balances of three independent branches of the government gone. Poof, magic, presto, disappeared. You know, sure, Trump still had to overcome corporations and the business community. But are you kidding? You know, he just gave them tax cuts and deregulations, and you know, they let him do anything he wants. We now see a lot of corporate America, and specifically the billionaire oligarchy, fully endorsing and enabling Trump in his second term. Of course, Trump couldn't have accomplished any of this without media and his highly effective manipulation of truth. Trump was good TV, and even better for podcasts. And you know why? Because all of us kept tuning in and all of us kept watching. We binge watched him. We memed him. We joked about him. We made him a pop culture event. And in a culture that's obsessed with celebrity, it turns out that policy doesn't matter. In his first run at office in 2016, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, News, all the major networks gave Trump wall-to-wall coverage because he was ratings gold. A well-known broadcast executive infamously said, "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." Social media algorithms promote outrage, lies, and division. And Trump's brand of politics was tailor-made for platforms that reward clicks over truth. So along came the YouTube and social media channels promoting and encouraging his candidacy. In short, Americans didn't just vote for Trump. They watched him. They shared him. They made him into a cultural icon. Once he lost office in 2020, it seemed like mainstream media might be turning on him. But when the public grew tired from sheer exhaustion of hearing about criticisms of Trump, his lies, and the chaos, the media went along with the ratings and just started reporting on him as a legitimate alternative, so as not to appear biased. Much of the mainstream media now presents Trump's lies and authoritarian impulses as some sort of normal political disagreement. They've normalized his behavior. And in that sense, the media ecosystem is just reflecting the public's appetite. Americans have always had a weird relationship with experts. It's a long tradition of distrusting elites, especially the so-called intelligentsia. Trump took that to an 11. He made truth optional. He turned lies into slogans. And somehow, people cheered. People stopped believing the news. They stopped believing doctors. Hell, they stopped believing in elections altogether. January 6th wasn't just an accident. It was a product of Trumpism being fed and reinforced by millions who preferred conspiracy over complexity. But not everyone deserves Trump. Let's be clear. Not all Americans support him. Heck, millions of people voted against him in 2020 and in 2024. They don't deserve him. There are journalists, election workers, whistleblowers, and public servants who've stood up against him at great risk. They don't deserve him. There are immigrants who are scapegoats. The LGBTQ Americans that he's tried to erase. The women, the black voters, the people who protested peacefully for a better democracy. They deserve something better. We all do. But democracy isn't a fantasy, it's a mirror. And the mirror has been cracked for a long time. At the end of the day, you get the leaders you tolerate, or maybe the ones that you fail to stop. And too many Americans decided that cruelty was entertaining, that lies were more comforting than truth, that chaos was worth it as long as it hurt the people they hated. So yeah, in a way, a country that rewards a man like Trump will keep getting more men like Trump until it stops rewarding them. So, do Americans deserve Donald Trump? Probably. But that doesn't mean they can't change their minds and reject him. But unfortunately, right now, that doesn't seem to be happening. Thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed this content, please like the video, leave your comments, and subscribe to the channel. Here are a few other videos you might enjoy. Have a great week.